Danny Rodriguez had checked out thousands of customers in 15 years behind the grocery register, but none broke his heart like the elderly man who kept buying groceries for 2 people, even though he'd been shopping alone for 6 months. Every Friday, Harold would stand in the cereal aisle, paralyzed by choices he used to make with his wife, until Danny learned that being a grocery clerk sometimes means being a guide through grief. As Danny sat across from Jimmy Fallon in the Tonight Show studio, his hands still moved as if scanning barcodes and bagging groceries, muscle memory from a decade and a half of serving a community that had become more than customers. They had become his extended family. Danny Rodriguez, 37, smoothed his tie nervously as the studio lights illuminated his face. He wore his best button-down shirt, the blue one his mother had bought him for his high school graduation, and his hands bore the permanent calluses from handling countless grocery bags and the slight repetitive strain from years of scanning items. For 15 years, he'd worked at Peterson's Market in suburban Cleveland, a family-owned grocery store where 3 generations of families had shopped for their daily needs. Tonight, he was here because a video of his interaction with a grieving widower had gone viral, touching millions who watched a grocery clerk become something much more important than someone who just rings up purchases. "So Danny," Jimmy said, leaning forward with genuine interest. 15 years working at a family grocery store. That's like being the heartbeat of a neighborhood, right? Danny's nervous energy began to ease as he found his voice, his slight Ohio accent warm with familiarity. "You know, Jimmy, people think grocery clerks just scan items and take money, but we're really witnesses to people's lives. I know when someone's having a party by what they buy, when they're sick by the medicine and soup in their cart, when they're celebrating by the cake and candles." The audience was immediately engaged, understanding they were hearing from someone who truly observed human nature through shopping habits. "What's the most interesting thing about watching people shop?" Danny's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely cared about his work. "The patterns, Jimmy. Mrs. Chen always buys exactly 7 apples every Tuesday. Mr. Williams gets the same lunch meat and bread every day because he makes his grandson's school sandwich the exact same way his late wife used to. People find comfort in routine, especially when everything else in their life feels uncertain." Jimmy nodded, clearly intrigued by Danny's perspective. "You're like a sociologist with a scanner." "Exactly. And over 15 years, you don't just learn what people buy, you learn their stories. I've celebrated promotions, mourned losses, watched kids grow up and go to college. When regular customers don't come in for a while, I genuinely worry about them." Jimmy's expression grew more thoughtful. "Speaking of regular customers, I understand there's one particular shopper who changed how you see your job?" Danny's hands stilled in his lap, and something in the studio atmosphere shifted. The easy conversation took on a weight that everyone could feel, the kind of heaviness that comes when discussing profound loss. "His name is Harold Peterson. Actually, his family owns the store where I work, but Harold shopped there like any other customer. For 40 years, he and his wife Martha came in every Friday at exactly 2 p.m. The studio audience was completely attentive, sensing they were about to hear something meaningful. I'd been checking them out for my entire 15 years at the store. They had this routine down to a science. Harold would push the cart, Martha would do the selecting. She knew exactly what they needed, how much, which brands. They'd chat with me about the weather, about their grandchildren, about how the neighborhood was changing." Jimmy found himself leaning forward, completely absorbed. Harold was this tough guy, you know? Retired auto mechanic, built like a truck, hands like leather. But with Martha, he was gentle. He'd follow her around the store like a lovesick teenager, carrying her purse, reaching high shelves for her, making these little jokes that only she understood. Danny paused, his eyes filling with memory. Then, about 8 months ago, Martha got sick. Cancer. During her treatment, Harold started shopping alone, but he'd always buy exactly what Martha told him to get. He'd have a handwritten list in her neat cursive, and he'd check each item off carefully. The studio was growing quieter, everyone understanding the weight of what Danny was describing. "What happened when Martha passed away?" Jimmy asked softly. "That's when everything changed." The first Friday after the funeral, Harold showed up at exactly 2 p.m., just like always. But he looked lost, Jimmy. Completely lost. Danny wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He walked around the store for almost an hour, picking things up, putting them back down. I watched him stand in the cereal aisle for 20 minutes, holding two different boxes, unable to decide which one Martha would have chosen. The audience was completely silent now, understanding the impossible choice Harold faced, learning to live without the person who had made all the small decisions for 4 decades. "So, what did you do?" Jimmy asked. At first, I didn't know what to do. It's not like they train you in grocery school for how to help someone whose entire world just disappeared. But when Harold finally came to my register, his cart was full of the strangest combination of items. Jimmy stood up from behind his desk, driven by an instinct that had nothing to do with television production and everything to do with recognizing something sacred when you hear it. What was in his cart? 2 of everything, Jimmy. 2 gallons of milk, 2 loaves of bread, 2 steaks, 2 frozen dinners. He was shopping for Martha like she was still there, but he was also shopping for himself because he knew she wasn't. Danny reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook, worn from use. When I saw that cart, I realized that Harold wasn't just grocery shopping. He was trying to figure out how to live as one person after being half of a couple for 40 years. The audience began to stir, not with restlessness, but with the kind of emotion that demands expression. I made a decision that day that changed everything. Instead of just scanning his items and taking his money, I asked Harold if he wanted help learning to shop for one person. Jimmy walked around his desk and sat on the edge, eliminating the barrier between them. How did he respond? He broke down crying right there at my register. This tough 78-year-old man just started sobbing. He said he didn't know how Martha decided which apples to buy, how she knew which cuts of meat were good, how she always seemed to know exactly what they needed. Danny's voice grew stronger as he continued. So, for the next 6 months, every Friday at 2 p.m., Harold would come in and I would take my break to shop with him. Not as his employee, but as his friend. The audience rose to their feet, not in orchestrated applause, but in spontaneous recognition of something profound. They weren't clapping for entertainment. They were bearing witness to love in its purest form. Jimmy stood up and turned to face the audience and cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where customer service is often about speed and efficiency. Danny Rodriguez reminds us that sometimes the most important service we can provide is simply slowing down when someone needs us to walk beside them." He turned back to Danny. "What did you teach Harold during those shopping trips?" "I didn't teach him anything, Jimmy. He taught me everything. Harold showed me that love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes form. Every choice he made in that store was still connected to Martha." Danny opened his notebook, revealing pages of handwritten notes. I started keeping track of the things Harold remembered about Martha's preferences, not for any official reason, but because I wanted to help him honor her memory while learning to live his own life. Jimmy looked at the notebook with profound respect. "What kinds of things did you learn?" Martha always bought green apples, never red, because Harold had diabetes and green apples have less sugar. She bought the expensive coffee because she said life was too short for bad coffee. She always picked the meat from the back of the display case because it was fresher. Danny's voice caught slightly. But the most beautiful thing was watching Harold start to make his own choices. After about 3 months, he started buying things Martha never would have. Spicy food, because she couldn't handle heat, ice cream for breakfast, because she always said that was ridiculous. Jimmy slid off his desk and knelt down beside Danny's chair, understanding that some moments require you to meet people where they are. Harold was learning to live again. Exactly. And I realized that my job wasn't just about groceries. It was about helping people navigate life transitions, about being present during the ordinary moments that are actually extraordinary. Jimmy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card. But this gesture felt different from all the others. It felt like a recognition between 2 people who understood service in its deepest form. "Danny, I want you to have this. Not because you're a guest, but because you understand something that every person in customer service needs to remember. That behind every transaction is a human story worth honoring." Danny took the card with hands that had scanned thousands of items, hands that had chosen compassion over efficiency when it mattered most. "You know what Harold taught me? He taught me that the most important items in someone's cart aren't always the ones you can see. Sometimes they're carrying memories, love, grief, hope, and your job is to handle all of it with care." The show ended differently that night. No desk pieces, no games, no comedy segments, just Jimmy and Danny talking about loss, about the profound impact of showing up for someone during their most vulnerable moments, about how the most ordinary jobs can become extraordinary callings when performed with love. 3 months later, Danny was promoted to store manager, but he insisted on still working register shifts on Fridays. Harold continued shopping every Friday at 2 p.m., but now he brought his new girlfriend, Eleanor, a widow he'd met at the senior center. Danny watched them navigate the aisles together, Harold teaching Eleanor about Martha's old preferences while learning Eleanor's new ones. The viral video that brought Danny to The Tonight Show was actually taken by another customer who witnessed one of Danny's shopping sessions with Harold. It shows Danny patiently explaining different cuts of meat while Harold takes careful notes. Both men understanding that this was about so much more than grocery shopping. It was about learning to live again. The episode became one of the most watched Tonight Show segments in history. Not because it was funny, but because it reminded viewers that heroism exists in the choice to see customers as complete human beings. To understand that everyone who walks through your door is carrying invisible burdens that only kindness can address. Danny still works at Peterson's Market, but now the store has implemented compassionate shopping training for all employees, teaching them to recognize when customers need more than just checkout service. The program has been adopted by grocery chains across the Midwest, understanding that shopping is often about more than buying. It's about maintaining dignity during life's transitions. Harold's original shopping list, written in Martha's handwriting, is framed behind Danny's register, not as a memorial, but as a reminder that love persists in the smallest details, that someone's final gift might be teaching their partner how to choose breakfast cereal and remember to buy milk. The notebook Danny showed Jimmy contains more than just Harold's story. It contains observations about dozens of customers navigating major life changes, new parents learning to shop for baby food, college, students living independently for the first time, elderly people adjusting to dietary restrictions, families dealing with job loss or illness. Jimmy learned something that night that changed his entire approach to late-night television, that the most powerful stories aren't always the ones that make people laugh. Sometimes they're the ones that remind us that we all need someone to walk beside us when we're learning to navigate life without the people who used to make the journey easier. The Tonight Show continued to entertain millions, but now it also served as a platform for recognizing that every interaction we have is an opportunity to practice compassion, to understand that the person across the counter might be buying groceries for the first time without someone they loved. And sometimes the most important item you can provide isn't something they can take home in a bag. Because Danny Rodriguez taught Jimmy Fallon and millions of viewers that true customer service isn't about speed or efficiency. It's about recognizing when someone needs you to slow down, when they need guidance through the ordinary tasks that used to be shared, when they need proof that they can learn to live alone without being lonely. The Friday afternoon shopping trips ended when Harold felt confident enough to navigate the store independently, but every week he still stops by Danny's register for a brief conversation. Last Friday, Harold mentioned that he was thinking about proposing to Eleanor. Martha would have liked her, he told Danny. She buys green apples too. Danny's approach to customer service has inspired a movement in retail called Heart First Service, where employees are trained to recognize emotional needs alongside shopping needs. The program teaches staff that a customer standing motionless in an aisle might not be indecisive about products. They might be overwhelmed by grief or the challenge of making choices independently. Peterson's Market now hosts New Beginnings shopping tours monthly, where recent widows, widowers, and people living independently for the first time can learn practical shopping skills in a supportive environment. Danny leads these sessions, understanding that grocery shopping is often the first step toward reclaiming independence after major life changes. The store created Martha's Corner, a small area near produce with comfortable seating where customers can rest, make lists, or simply take a moment when shopping becomes overwhelming. A plaque reads, "In memory of Martha Peterson and all the love that lives on in the smallest daily choices." Harold's story sparked conversations in grocery stores nationwide about hidden customer struggles. Many stores began training employees to offer assistance not just for finding products, but for customers who seem confused or distressed, the 2-minute rule was implemented. If a customer appears to be struggling for more than 2 minutes, offer gentle assistance